Hi, Stephen McCormick here for TubbTalk, the podcast for IT consultants. And why are you hearing my voice instead of Richard Tubbs? Well, Richard is the guest for our very special 125th episode, and I'm the one going to be asking him the questions. So, hello to you, Richard.
Thank you for having me, Stephen. That feels really weird to say, but thanks for having me, yeah.
I bet it does, yeah. Now, Richard, as well as being the host of TubbTalk, you're an author, you're a speaker in the channel, and you're also a former MSP owner. And in fact, you'd probably call that your origin, wouldn't you? So, and that's what we're here to talk to you about today. So, first of all, then, why don't you tell me your origins in IT? How did you start out? How did you move from being an employee in a company to starting your own business?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, I've always been into IT from a little kid, and my background was actually in corporate IT. So I used to work for the likes of Ernst & Young and GE Capital, the NHS for a time. And yeah, great experience when I was younger, because it's actually something I took forward to the managed services, because it taught me the idea of scalability and standardization and systems and processes. But perhaps I'm getting a bit ahead of myself. So I worked there, and then what happened after a little period of time after being in corporate IT was a lot of the people who worked in the corporations and that went off, started their own businesses, picked up the phone to me, Steve, and said, like, can you do some like moonlighting? Can you come and do a bit of work for us, setting up our IT? I was like, yeah. And before I knew it, that was becoming a full-time gig. So I started working for myself as a jobbing IT guy, crawling under tables, plugging in Ethernet cables and things of that nature. That went on for, I'm going to say that was probably about 2000, 2001. And so I was your one-man band IT or one-person band IT company for a few years. And then I came across this concept of managed services, which is fairly commonplace now. And I read a book, The E-Myth, Revisited by Michael Gerber, and I started discovering the work of Carl Palachuk and Eric Simpson and, all these wonderful people who invented managed services, really. And I thought, you know what? I don't want to own a job anymore. I want to own a business, if that makes sense. So
absolutely,
I got into that, and it's probably about 2004, 2005. Really threw myself into it. Was hoovering up every piece of information out there. And I should say, fast forward to today, there's loads of info available. Back then, not so much. There was the odd books and things, but lots of people were very open and sharing with me. And so I built the IT business, very big on systems processes. From day one, I thought I want to eliminate myself from the business so the business can run without me. And that proved, to be the right decision, because it was about 2011, 2012, forget the exact time, I sold, grown the business. It could run without me, and I sold the business.
I was going to say, actually, so what made you come to that decision then? What made you decide to sell up? What was the factor that pushed you over the edge, so to speak?
Yeah, well, it was an interesting, like a very personal situation, but I'm happy to share. So whilst I was growing the MSP business and basically learning about managed services, I used to do a lot of attending of user groups, speaking at peer groups, and writing blog posts. I was like one of the earliest bloggers, and I think people mostly know me for that now. But I look back, and there were some really embarrassing blogs because I was finding my way, in the industry. But the interesting thing was, a lot of my competitors at the time thought that I was crazy for sharing this information with other people. Yeah. I've actually, people said to me, why are you giving away all the secret sauce? I was like, well, there's no secret sauce. I've learned this from other people. Anyway, so I was blogging. I got well known in the managed services industry, but as a peer. And then, a big life event happened. I know you understand about this. My dad passed away. He was 82 years of age. So he'd had like a good innings. Mm-hmm. It was obviously, it came as a shock, but it wasn't unexpected. And that was just a turning point. And I remember being at my dad's funeral, and there was people coming along there who had been, they'd not spoken to him in maybe 20, 30 years. And they came along to the funeral and were coming up to me and introducing themselves and saying, look, your dad wouldn't remember this, but he did this for me 30 years ago. He did this, and my dad was an old school gentleman and, treated everybody, really well and everything. And it was, I don't want to say a revelation, but I thought, well, this is what legacy means. This is what I want people to speak about me like this when I'm, gone. And hopefully I've got a while to go yet, but when I'm gone. Am I going to achieve that running the managed service business, or am I going to achieve more impact helping other MSPs? Because lots of MSPs were asking me for help at this point, even though I was a competitor. So I was very fortunate. I'd built the business so that, it could run without me. So I made the decision to sell the business.
Absolutely. Yeah. Now, you have mentioned some great things there, which we will touch upon. Particularly, you did write a blog article about your father's passing and what legacy means to you. So we'll make sure that that's in the show notes. But I wanted to touch back to, now I said that you were an author and you wrote a book called The IT Business Owner's Survival Guide. What was it that inspired you to write that book? Yeah,
so after I sold the IT business, I started going in and doing consulting and advisory work, helping other managed service providers. Obviously, the blog continued. We've added the podcast and all sorts of things, been going many, many years. And it reached a point where there was so many people getting in touch, asking for advice. And some of them, MSP owners, were drowning. And I mean that metaphorically, they were drowning underneath the demands, the pressures, and they were reaching out to me. And I do respond to every email that I get, and I get in touch with everybody. But it occurred to me, there's for every one person who gets in touch and asks my advice about, keeping the head above water, there's probably going to be another 100 who are feeling the same way, but perhaps, wouldn't reach out to me. So that's where the book came from. I mean, I often say that my role in the industry now is helping other IT business owners to avoid all of the mistakes that I made. And of course, I made a load of mistakes. So there's like an infinite source of content. But the IT Business Owner Survivor Guide was really focused on what I found with hindsight, looking back, were the key mistakes that I made. Not getting enough sleep and running myself ragged, not taking holidays, not delegating effectively, not outsourcing and, things of that nature. So that book was written as a way for anybody to benefit from the mistakes that I made and hopefully avoid them, because, I want people to enjoy working in managed services. And I think most people get into this industry because they enjoy helping other people, but they often don't help themselves, and find themselves drowning. So that's where the book came from.
Absolutely, yes. So I'm going to pitch a question to you now then. So we've talked about where you've come from. Let's say you were going to start an MSP in 2023. What do you think are the top trends that are happening in the year ahead? Mm-hmm. And how do they compare to the trends that were occurring at the time that you were starting out? What's changed?
Ooh, that's a good question. So I ran the IT business for 8-10 years before I sold it, and I've been doing what I do now for 12 years. So it's been 12 years since I sold the MSP business. So the times were, I'm not going to say very different, but some of it was different. So I was one of the first advocates of what is now known as cloud computing. And I remember my peers laughing at me saying, we're not going to get rid of servers. And fast forward, we don't have servers and things. Or maybe we will again now with the energy crisis. But in answer to your question, if I was to start an MSP in 2023, I think what would look different, cybersecurity would be top of that list. If I rewind, to when I was running an MSP, cybersecurity was really like antivirus, a decent firewall, things of that nature. Fast forward to today, cybersecurity is mind-boggling because the bad guys have got, the cyber criminals, they are so sophisticated. And like for MSPs running the business today, I actually would go as far as to say it might be too much for an MSP alone to handle, some clients' cybersecurity. And that's not diminishing the MSP's role, but what I mean is I would probably work with a third party to provide, security consultancy, security, perhaps even a security operations center, things of that nature. So cybersecurity would be the first thing I would say. And the other thing, which is we're just starting to see in 2023, I've been sort of banging the drum about this for a while now, artificial intelligence. Most people think of AI and they think, the Terminator and all that stuff. It's not like that. But what I really mean with AI for managed service providers is actually automation. And those MSPs who grab hold of automation are going to do things faster, better, cheaper than the competition. And those MSPs that don't pay attention, don't really get themselves involved in artificial intelligence, machine learning, automation, are suddenly going to find that they're doing things a lot slower than the competitors. There's some brilliant companies out there. A company that I do advisory work with, SuperOps, have got so much automation built into their RMM and PSA platform that I look back now and go, why were me and my engineers messing around with, pushing tickets around and doing this, that, and the other when it really should have been working for us? So cybersecurity and automation / AI, I would say the two big things that if I was to be brand new to the industry in 2023, that's where I'd place my focus.
There is a saying, though, isn't there, that if you don't like doing something, automate it or outsource it, which leads me quite well onto my next question now. So you've always been a big advocate for outsourcing. If there's a tip that you could give to a new MSP or anyone that wants to kind of go down that route that maybe hasn't gone down that route before, what would you advise would be the first two or three things they should look to outsource?
Yeah. So I'll address the subject of outsourcing first of all. It's a bit of a soapbox topic. We work together, that for me.
Definitely.
So many managed service providers are essentially going to their clients and saying, hey, don't worry about the IT. You focus on what you do best, look after your business, growing your business, and outsource the running of the managed services, the IT, to us. Makes total sense, and that is one of the fundamentals of managed services. And yet, so many MSPs are reluctant to outsource any of their services. So back when I ran my MSP business, we were one of the first in Europe, actually, certainly the UK, to outsource our NOC, our Network Operations Center. You've worked as an engineer in the IT industry, you're good at it. I'm restarting backups and patching server. This is not the sort of stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning, is it?
No,
yet,
not at all.
It's the bread and butter for the client work that we do. But we embraced an outsourced IT service for the NOC, and we didn't outsource the help desk at the time, although that's certainly possible. But fast forward to today, and if your engineers are spending an inordinate amount of time on, I'm going to say low value, but high amount of time taking activities such as patching and all of those things, outsourcing is a perfect fit for them. I'd go further than that as well. I'd say outsourcing is a perfect fit for things like HR. So you don't want to be, you've got to manage people, but you don't want to be looking after the HR function. Yeah. Most of us got into this industry because we don't want to be accountants. So you need to know basic bookkeeping, but you outsource your accounts to a good accountant. And as I said earlier on, outsourcing the security operations center might be a great way to go forward as well. So outsourcing, I'm really shocked that more outsourcing IT companies don't outsource more. In answer to your question, where would you start? Well, if you're a bit nervous about it, the NOC is a brilliant way to get started. So the patching, the server reboots, updates, backups, and things of that nature. I work with a client, Uptime Solutions, Jason Kemsley and Brad Monday, UK-based service. They offer, outsourced NOC, outsourced SOC, outsourced help desk. They've got clients all across the UK. They've got offices in the US, New Zealand, so they can offer 24/7 coverage. And, going back to your earlier question, if I was to start an MSP again today, I would absolutely outsource that stuff that's not a lot of fun, but it's absolutely necessary to free up my engineers' time to go and do the high value work that the clients really, truly notice. And then you can, that's the first step that you can take. But nowadays, outsourced help desks, outsourced SOC, outsourced web design, outsourced accountancy, outsourced HR. There's a plethora of services out there. And in fact, I've built my business now. I know it's not a managed service provider anymore. We're more of a media company. But every single one of the people who work with me are virtual assistants. They work for themselves. They work in different parts of the world, in different time zones. Really doesn't matter because the tools are there now to work with a remote team that's anywhere. So I'd encourage any MSP, look into outsourcing. And if you're nervous, start with a knock, because the clients don't see the benefit of that, but they sure as heck get annoyed if those sort of things don't work properly. So.
Absolutely. Now we're going to go back again to something that's something that you do advocate talking about a lot, and I want to know a bit more about how you first came into your mental health journey, and at what point did you realise that when you were working your MSP that you were under a lot of strain, and what did you do about it? I just think this will be very helpful for anybody that might be feeling any kind of pressure at the moment.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. I mean, it's taken me a while to get to this stage, but and over the years, I've dropped what I would say breadcrumbs about my mental health challenges. But the world has reached a point now where I think people are, if not comfortable, are much more open to talking about these sort of challenges. So, I'll be open and honest and say, I've battled with clinical depression. I was diagnosed with that in my early to mid 20s. Clinical depression is an imbalance of chemicals in the brain. So if I don't look after stress levels, if I don't look after my health and my physical health, and things don't get enough sleep, and that can lead to catastrophic consequences. But I've talked more openly about that now. I'll give an example. I know you were in the audience. I was delivering a presentation having a conversation at an event in London, IT event. There was 100 plus MSPs in the audience, and I talked openly about depression, mental health. And I said, statistically, 1 in 4 of us are going to hit mental health challenges.
Yeah.
It might even be higher than that now, I think. But what that meant was the audience, I said, and the audience was mostly blokes. The IT industry, very, sort of a male-focused industry, and that's changing. Maybe we'll get onto that. But I said that what that means is in the audience today, 25 of you here are either going to be struggling, statistically, 25 of you are going to be struggling with mental health challenges or really in a bad place at the moment. And I've been in a really bad place with it, And I was, I could get emotional talking about this, but I was actually really encouraged then throughout that day. 4 different chaps came up to me and said, firstly, I'd got no idea about you. And you're so bubbly and, all these sort of things. I'm like, yeah, you can mask it really well. And secondly, I'm really struggling at the moment. And so I got the opportunity to talk with them. And since then, since I've been open about it, we've got a page on the website with mental health resources for MSPs. I've written in magazines and spoken about this. But I think for anybody watching or listening to this, with mental health challenges, first of all, don't be ashamed of it, because everybody gets affected by it, or everybody knows somebody. And secondly, don't try and do this on your own. And that's something perhaps I did for too long, just to try and battle through it, to try and force my way through it. And that's not the way it works. And seek out help. And again, I'll say this numerous times, but this managed service industry, the best industry in the world. People are so supportive, so open. And from that perspective, don't be afraid about talking about it. And I think attitudes are changing, thankfully.
Definitely, yes. So you brought up the community there, and that's actually what I want to discuss with you next. So I've been in the channel for a year now myself, and the MSP community is wonderful in that respect. Everyone's so engaging, and they are open to discussions. What does the MSP community mean to you then, Richard?
It's wonderful, and I think it's a unique community as a whole ecosystem there, the channel as we call it. I speak to friends, and I know we've had conversations. You're fairly new to the channel. I've been doing this like 20 plus years or whatever. And I speak to people and I say, we get in a room with our competitors and we talk about what we're earning and what's working and what's not working. And they look and go, what, are you crazy? We've got friends that work in insurance, finance, real estate, all of those things. And they're like, we would never do that, with our so-called competitors. And yet the MSP industry, that's the bread and butter for this industry. There are way, way more people, the majority of people will share openly and honestly to help others than those will hoard all the information, keep to themselves. That old adage that a rising tide lifts all boats, I think that's absolutely true for this industry. And there's way more than enough customers, clients for all of us. So, for anybody who's watching or listening to this and going, what were your competitors? This sounds crazy. It really isn't. And I would rewind and say, there was a number of factors in me, accelerating the growth of my MSP business and selling it and, going on to enjoy what I doing now. The community was way up at the top there. So when I was starting out, unusually for me, I kept my mouth closed and kept my ears open. And some of the smartest, most successful people in this industry gave freely of their time and advice to me. And, so I see part of what I'm doing now of passing that forward. But, some of the communities that are out there are incredible. I'll reel off some of the names. So CompTIA. If people are not familiar with CompTIA, they may be familiar with it for the certifications, the A+, the Network Plus, those sort of things. But CompTIA they're a not-for-profit organisation. They do a lot of advocacy on part of the IT industry, and they've got managed services communities. I have to joke. So I was the chairman of the CompTIA UK technology community, the very first chairman, the inaugural chairman. There was 20 of us in a room in the first event in Birmingham. And you've been to the more recent CompTIA events, and there's 100, 200, 500 people at the London events.
Yeah.
So I often say, we got CompTIA started, and as soon as I stepped down as chairman, that community really flourished. So it's like, but at CompTIA, they do quarterly meetings in, the UK, Benelux and other places, as well as in the US. So seek them out. Other communities that are just wonderful, the Tech Tribe. Aren't the most awesome online community, and now we've got local Tech Tribe meetups here in the UK, Europe, and the United States, and that. And of course, I was part of that business up until last year, and the only reason I stepped away from that business, I was actually neglecting my own business. Yeah. And I want to write more books, I want to get more stuff out there, but we did great work. Nigel Moore, the founder of the Tech Tribe, I worked with Nigel. Approached me after reading books and my blogs years ago, and when he sold his MSP business, approached me and said, can you take a look at this community? And honestly, I'll say to this day, the Tech Tribe, and as I said to Nigel at the time, if I was to build a community, which I'm not, it's a lot of hard work, no chance I would ever get involved there, in building a community. If I were to build a community, though, it would look exactly like the Tech Tribe. Wonderful, wonderful community. And then there's we could talk about this all day, Steve. But there's other communities like Network Group, and in America there's ASCII. There's local groups, feet on the ground. The point is, there is so many people out there who are willing to help. So running an IT business can be a lonely gig. Yeah. Really, really lonely. We talked about mental health a little bit earlier, and that's one of the worst things that you can do is try and do it on your own. Fast forward to today, and thankfully there are hundreds of groups and communities, peer groups, and then we've not even talked about working with coaches and other things of that nature. Some amazing people out there now. So yeah. I'm sort of jealous. If I was to run an MSP today, there's so much information and things out there. So
I was going to say then. So there weren't that many communities out there when you first started out as an MSP. So who were the people that you sought out, and what kind of advice did you actually get back? Were they quite reasonable to actually talk to?
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I've always found surprising to this day is that the most successful, and I don't just mean successful in terms of finances, I mean in terms of how they've built their life, how they've built their business. The most successful people in the world I found to be the most accessible people. I've spoken to millionaires, I've spoken to billionaires, I've spoken to people who've got life-work balance sorted, easy for me to say, but I just approach them and they'll share their advice. I'll give a shout out to one of the communities I was involved in when I ran my MSP business. At the time, it was called HTG, Heartland's Technology Group. It's now known as ConnectWise Evolve. And a wonderful community. I was the founder member of HTG 11, which was the first UK group. There was me and a guy called Raja Pagadala, who still runs an MSP, The Final Step. Interviewed him recently, wonderful friend. But there was 12 of us got together in the room and we shared financials. We held each other accountable. We asked hard questions. We talked about staffing issues. That was super powerful for me. I was the smallest in terms of revenue MSP in the room, but I still felt like I had a place at the table because I could contribute. I was nimble, and again, wonderful community. Raja, Arlen Sorensen was the founder of HGG, which is now owned by ConnectWise, and Arlen was such a great mentor to me. He ran an MSP based out in the rural area of the United States, and built it into, I think it was a $50 million business there. You know, I don't know how he did that. They obviously need a lot of IT in agriculture. But Arlen was fantastic. The guys at HTG in my peer group, James Cash and Malcolm Dyack and Raja Bagadala, a wonderful community, but so many other people that helped me along the way. So I mentioned, he's now turned into a great friend of mine, but it still is my tech hero, Carl Palachuk, who was one of the architects, I'll say, of managed services. This is the guy who really created the concept of managed services. And, Carl and I see each other at least once, twice a year now, get together in person. He comes on holiday or whatever. We did a road trip last year around Edinburgh and Falkirk and Glasgow and Manchester. Just, the guy's turned into a really good friend to me and my wife, but such an incredible mentor. Again, wrote blogs, wrote books. So Carl's got 20 odd books out there about managed services. Incredible. And then other people that some listeners might not be aware of. So Eric Simpson, who I got the opportunity recently to sit in a studio and interview. Just a great hero of mine and just a wonderful person. And Eric wrote all of these books that I consumed that taught me about managed services. And then we've got Harry Brailsford, who ran SMB Nation. And, I've become friends with Harry and learned. So again, probably way too many people to mention, but these are people that I consider wildly successful in all aspects of their life and so accessible. You just pick up the phone to them, drop them an email, walk up to them at events and talk to them, and they'll tell you what you need to know, whether it's what you want to hear or what you don't want to hear, and that. So just a wonderful community full of some incredible people.
That is perfect. And, I think I just want to say that all of the names that we have mentioned, they will appear in the show notes as per normal. So you don't have to worry about finding them all. They will all appear at the bottom. So I just want to talk to you about other authors that have inspired you now. So you were always recommending books. You're a big reader, and there's always a nugget that you can share with us, which is from someone who's written a book that has inspired you or has taught you something. So is there any that you're reading currently, or any that you would say definitely read if you haven't read, because they are so inspiring?
Oh, so many books, and I don't want to, endanger
Absolutely. If you could,
overwhelming Goodrun, who does our podcast show notes, and she'd have to list like 1 million books or whatever. But so the three that really impacted me, I've sort of skirted around one of them already. So the book that really changed my life professionally was The E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber. And for anybody, listening, watching this, not familiar with the E-Myth Revisited, I call it the Bible for managed services. So it's nothing at all to do with managed services, but it's everything to do with managed services. It's about systemizing, automating a business, building processes, and that. Just wonderful, wonderful book. And I still reread that every couple of years to remind myself, I should be delegating or outsourcing or systemizing this sort of thing. So the E-Myth Revisited, number one book that I would recommend. And then there's two other books that I'll throw out there that were really life-changing for me, in not necessarily just in managed services, but from a business owner, personal development. The second one for me was, I'm a productivity nerd. Yeah. We talk about it. But I wasn't always that way. In fact, I would go as far as to say I'm the world's biggest procrastinator. I'm disorganized. And that was costing me time and money when I was running the MSP business, until I read a book called Getting Things Done by an author called David Allen. And GTD, as it's known, in productivity circles, is a whole methodology, and it's about becoming productive, about clearing your head out, putting things down into systems rather than trying to... Because, David Allen said this, and I often get quoted in the MSP industry, but it's David Allen's quote. And to paraphrase it, it says, the mind is great for generating ideas, but not so much for carrying them around. Absolutely. So I read GTD by David Allen, and I've, again, we talked about how accessible these people are. David and his wife Catherine live in Amsterdam, over in the Netherlands now. And so my wife and I have got to spend some time with them, and just an incredible guy. But if you're struggling with productivity, procrastination, getting things in order, GTD, Getting Things Done, wonderful book. And the third one I'd throw out there, which might be a bit of a curveball for some people, but it really, sort of changed my life, is a book called The Go-Giver. By John David Mann and Bob Berg. And again, Bob Berg, I don't sound like I'm name dropping. I was only exchanging emails with him this morning. He's become somebody very influential on me, very accessible, somebody I can reach out to at any point. And The Go-Giver, I don't want to spoil the story for anybody who's not read The Go-Giver, but The Go-Giver is like a parable. Sort of a business story, and it'll take you less than an hour to read. And it's about, we're all familiar with go-getters, these people, they're always hustling, don't like that word, but always hustling, trying to get things done. Go-givers, what does it look like if we put other people's needs and, demonstrate value to them, put them first, focus on over-delivering on value. And some people say, well, you don't want to be a pushover. It's not like that. I'd encourage you to read The Go-Giver. But yeah. I think I'm predisposed, I'm hardwired to be a go-giver. And that might sound arrogant, I don't mean it to be, but, I'm always trying to elevate other people, trying to help. And that's, I think, what most people in the MSP industry do. They want to help people. That's why they get into this industry. But The Go-Giver created this set of rules to really help you be more intentional about how you're giving to other people. And so, those are the three books that really changed my life. And I don't use that word, that sentence, lightly. They were life-changing for me. And The Go-Giver, I gift that book all the time to people. So I say, hey, you read The Go-Giver? No. Right, I'll send you a copy of the book or whatever. So, it's one of those ones that I really, you can tell some people get it, other people don't get it. The ones who get it are just, I think, wonderful people to hang around with, and that's the majority of the MSP community. Excellent.
That is, that just in a nutshell covers the community, really, doesn't it? So that's great. I'm going to change tack a bit here now and focus on operations. So I don't mean operations in a hospital, but so we're going to first of all talk about sales. So when you were starting out as an MSP, how did you tackle your sales process? Was it something that came organically natural, or was it like it is for most MSPs that I talk to, a bit of a chore to begin with?
Sales. Oh, wow.
I know. So I'll give you some time. I'm sorry.
So when I started out in the MSP industry, and we talked about being a go-giver, so you would have thought this comes naturally, they say. No, it didn't work. So I, like so many people, get hung up with the stereotype of sales. And sales that I think most people think is you've got to persuade somebody to buy what you're selling.
Yeah.
And I've learnt differently with the Go-Giver and things of that nature now. The Go-Giver taught me, my attitude towards sales changed when I realised, actually, I just want to go in and help that person. And if I can help them, great. If I can't help them, somebody else will help them. Really changed it. But rewind, my sales process was non-existent. I'd reinvent the wheel every time I went out to sit with a prospect. And I got really nervous doing it. I'd sit down and sales, to the point where I'd procrastinate and sort of avoid doing sales because it felt so awkward. And I know that's not unusual in the MSP industry. But I decided to grab the bull by the horns. I was like, this is a big part of running a business. How can I become comfortable doing this? So I did some training with an organisation called Sandler Sales Institute. And joining the dots backwards, it's a very Go-Giver type attitude. I should be on commission with Bob Berg, shouldn't I? The amount of time I said Go-Giver
so,
here.
yeah.
But it's such an influence on me. But Sandler Sales Institute was about, other people might call it consultative selling. So that's not going in to do a hard sell. It's going in to listen, to ask pertinent questions, to listen, and then see if you can provide a solution to people. And when I did that, that really transformed the way I saw sales. As instead of trying to persuade people, it was just trying to go in and help people. And again, I don't want to be overly repetitive about this, but I truly think that most people get into managed services because they enjoy helping people. So if people can change their attitude from sales is like, icky, slimy, persuading people, dirty tricks and all that, it isn't like that. No. Just, go in. But something you said about a system, super, super important. Sandler Sales Institute taught me this system of, doing things that was, I could repeat. It was, sustainable. I could do it again and again without having to reinvent the wheel. But if we fast forward to the modern day, and again, a company that I really rate highly is a company called Zementum, which is, most people think of them as being a quoting tool. It's way more than that. It's a sales system. It's, a revenue platform for MSPs and that. And this is not an advert for Zementum. No. It's just, wow, the tools that are available now that really help an MSP to follow a logical sales system and to do that well. Super, super powerful. So if you've not, looked at Zementum before, take a look. But hopefully that explains my sales journey. And for anybody watching this who feels sales is a bit icky or whatever, look into the Go-Giver. There's a book called Selling Technology the Sandler Way, which like the Sandler Sales Institute is a very big investment of time and money, but that book gives you the overview of it. And look into Zementum because, it really... it systemizes the way that you should do sales. And so if you're feeling nervous about it, just follow the system that other smarter people than us have put together and you'll get the results.
Absolutely. Right. On the subject of marketing, what techniques did you use when you were starting your MSP, and what techniques would you adopt today in the same circumstances?
Yeah, that makes sense. So one of the first things that I would say to anybody listening or watching this, that regardless of what marketing technique you use, do it consistently. So many MSPs, that I come across, they say, our marketing's not working, we're finding it hard to find new clients. And I say, what are you tried? And they say, we've tried direct mail, we've tried cold calling, we've tried networking, et cetera, et cetera. And I say, look, what are you doing at the moment? Oh, well, we've given up on all of them. So people tend to, I think, try something in isolation, and actually marketing is a joined up approach. It isn't something that you want to be going, we need new customers, we're going to start marketing. Something you're doing all of the time, basically. So, but in terms of the techniques that worked for me when I ran the MSP business, the one that I put at the top of the list, and this is probably not the one that most MSPs are going to want to hear, is networking, meeting people, face-to-face, in person, getting out there at events and things of that nature. That worked really well for me because I think that old adage, people do business with people they know, like and trust. Well, they get to know, like and trust you by getting out and meeting them and stuff. So I went to a lot of business networking events, and whilst I find it sort of terrifying, to walk into a room full of strangers. It's over time, it became much more natural to me. The big thing about networking, I would say, going to business networking events, don't go out there to sell. That sounds a bit odd. You've asked me what marketing techniques work, to sell to new clients and things. But if you go to a networking event, we've all been at networking events where there's that networking bulldog, or more than one of them, where they're thrusting business cards into people's hands, and and it drives you a bit bananas, because you don't want to do business with people like that, do you? What I think works a lot better is to build up connections with people, allow people to get to know you, and then the referrals start to happen as a result of the relationship that you've built up with them. So networking worked really well for us, but all of the other things that I mentioned, direct mail, we were a big fan of what we call, and I think it was Robin Robbins who coined the term lumpy mail. So we used to send, and lumpy mail means, doing a marketing shot where perhaps back in the day we would send cassettes out to people and say, there's a free cassette for you. Now, I'm not old enough that cassettes were still really valid. The point was, then on the letter we'd say, what, you're no longer using cassettes? Then why are you using tape drives for your backup and things when there's online backup? Lumpy mail stood out from the rest. So that was something that worked for us. But again, it's consistently, you've got to follow up that mail shot with telephone calls, with emails. Nowadays, you connect with people on LinkedIn and so on and so forth. So if I was to fast forward to today, I would use those techniques, but I would probably follow the advice of somebody like a Paul Green or an Andrew Moon, who are LinkedIn experts and can help MSPs really use social media well in a joined-up approach. But using anything in isolation, you're only going to get limited results. And if you don't do things consistently, you're not going to see the results either. So, yeah, that's marketing for me.
Absolutely. Right. Now, I spoke to an MSP who maybe doesn't know you as well as everyone else does, but he seemed to think of you more as a more as a business advisor. Would you still consider yourself a techie, or would you consider yourself now more of a business consultant that's a bit less involved in the nuts and bolts of technical work?
Oh, mate, I love that question, because, so I'm a massive techie geek, massive techie geek. I started out in this industry, like so many of us in the MSP industry, because I love helping people and because I love playing around with tech. So that is still the case on a personal level for me. My home is full of technology and things. What I would say is, I don't get involved, I don't talk about tech specifically to the MSPs that I speak to, and that's for a very good reason. Like, they're the experts in it, and tech moves on so fast. Who am I to be talking to people about Active Directory and about things of that nature? However, I still understand the tech. So what I like to do is, have conversations with people, let them know I understand the tech, but really talk to them about how they can make money with the tech, and I'm not one of these guys, it's just like, it's all about making money. Of course, there's more to life than that. But if you're running an IT business and you're really good with tech, but nobody knows about you, what is the point? Going back to marketing. And secondly, if you're only good with tech, when you're speaking to clients purely about tech, you're going to get pigeonholed as the IT guy. And, nobody really wants that, because you've got to speak to business owners in terms they understand, which is like return on investment, which is, talking about the finances, talking about how you're going to save them or make them money. So it's really interesting that some people get the perception that I'm not a techie, because I'm a massive techie geek, but I only tend to talk about business and how to grow your business and things. I will say, when I was running the MSP business, it's really easy to get comfortable with doing what you're comfortable at, which is techie stuff. So, and that was a tipping point for me, an inflection point when I realized I'm not going to grow a business if I'm just doing techie stuff, if I'm being a senior technician all day. So that when I started going down the path of learning sales, learning marketing, building relationships with people, that type of thing, that was when the business started to take off. However, I still kept my hand in from a technical perspective. And I guess this goes out to anybody, listening or watching this, who maybe gets frustrated with their team, who don't want to do training, they don't want to do Certification. Oh yeah, I don't need my MCSE or my MCP or MCSA and all those type of things. I know all of that stuff. Why do I need a certification for it? You've got to lead by example. So back when I was running the MSP business, I continued doing my certifications to A, keep my hand in, and to B, to say to the team, look, I'm running the business and I'm still doing, I'm still keeping my hand in doing the techie stuff. Then there was really no excuse from the engineers to say I'm too busy to do a certification, because those are the sort of things, although it's got limited value with customers, with clients, nobody says, oh, are you MCP or whatever. It's about proving that you're doing continuous learning and keeping on that sort of cycle. Again, a bit like marketing, you've got to do it consistently. I think with learning, it isn't, oh, right, I've learned everything, that's it. You've got to build a culture of continuous learning, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's just, I guess it's just a belt and braces approach to showing that you are competent at what you deliver. So I think that's very important. Now, Richard, I have thrown the questions out to the floor of your MSP peers, and they've come back with some questions for you as well. So, so I'm going to fire them at you now. So the first one is from Moston Thomas, of course, cyber security guru, and he's got this question for you. What advice would you give to a young person wanting to start out in the same journey as you, and what would you not advise them to do?
Ooh, great question. Thank you, Mostin. If for somebody starting out in the MSP industry or even the IT industry as a whole, the first thing I would say is, going back to what we just talked about, continuous learning, I would put time and energy into not only learning the technical skills and getting the certifications required. So I'd start out with like the CompTIA A+, Network Plus, sort of vendor neutral ones that give you a good ground in there. But I would be actively seeking out people in the industry to learn from as well. Yeah. Now, a lot of IT people, a lot of technical people, they prefer working with computers than human beings. I can totally understand that. But seeking out other people to learn from is powerful. Like when I was running my MSP business, as I said earlier on, unusually for me, I kept my mouth shut and my ears open and learnt from some of the most successful people in our industry. So for somebody starting out, perhaps if they're a good technician, just about, they're thinking, right, I can turn this technology into value for clients. Brilliant. But you've got to become good at marketing. You've got to become comfortable with sales as well. So, the technical aspects will take you so far, but you've got to learn the other skills to go with it. Now, Mostin said, what would I not do?
What would you not do?
And I think it's probably the reverse of that advice, which is I wouldn't try and do it on my own.
Yeah.
I absolutely wouldn't. I think MSPs believe that they've got to be a jack of all trades. That's not the case at all. So if I was running an MSP business now, if I was a young person, which I'm not anymore, I would surround myself with people who can deliver services and solutions to my clients way better than I ever could. So there'd be a touch of outsourcing in there. I would build great relationships with vendors who have got really good solutions that they can offer. And I would also make sure that I go to peer groups and things of that nature. So what I wouldn't do is to try and forge my own path, do it all on my own, because as unique as every MSP thinks they are, the reality is the problems that they come across, the hurdles that they need to overcome, somebody's been there and done that before and found the solution. And by getting involved in peer groups, peer communities, going to conferences, getting involved online, reading books and things of that nature, you're going to learn from other people. So please don't try and do it on your own.
Yeah, definitely. Right, I've got a question for you from Joshua Lieberman. And he says, with the overload of dire security stories in popular press and the security or disaster fatigue that develops for both prospects and existing clientele, how do we break through and change the narrative of that?
Ooh, what a wonderful question. Thank you, Joshua. And I hope to get together with Josh soon. He's one of the most interesting men in the MSP channel. I always say that about him. So hope to see you at a conference soon. Great question. I would say I totally understand the idea of security fatigue. It's like, oh, the sky's falling in, and MSPs, especially speaking to their clients, they're not listening to us because historically SMBs believe that cybersecurity is something that affects big companies. It's not going to affect me. We're too small. Why would a cyber criminal be interested in us? The reality is the cyber criminal's not interested in anybody. They're interested in money. So I think you need to demonstrate to cut through the noise would be to keep your eyes and ears open for issues, cybersecurity issues that affect SMBs similar to your clients. So you need to cut through the noise by letting your clients realize that actually cyber criminals, they target anybody who's got money. You're not too small for them, but clients typically only really understand that if you come to them and say, did you hear about this company nearby that's just like you? They were breached and they ended up paying ransomware and these type of things. That cuts through the noise, I believe. So look for issues in maybe the local press, although local press don't seem to cover cybersecurity for local businesses so much. But at business networking events and things of that nature, look for examples of where somebody has been breached. Even if you find on the technical press or whatever, ZDNet or PC Pro, things of that nature, capture those stories and then reframe the stories in a way that makes them relevant to your clients, to help them understand this is happening to people like you out there at the moment. You are not immune to it, and so we want to keep you safe. That's the way I would go about it nowadays.
Excellent, yes. Right, now I've got a couple of questions from our friend James Steele. I'll start with his first one. How does your typical week differ now as in what you do compared to what you used to do when you were running your MSP business?
Good question. And James by the way, James, you're killing it with the videos at the moment.
They're really great videos, James. Honestly, I am in awe of them.
So anybody listening to this and not checked out James Steele's videos, go and check them out on his YouTube channel. So what does my typical week look like now compared to when I was running an MSP business? I think at the start of my MSP journey, my days, my hours were a lot more reactive at the beginning. And I think most MSPs listening or watching to this will appreciate that. They'll say, we've got emails to deal with, we've got fires to put out at our client sites, et cetera, et cetera. The key to me growing the MSP business was to realize that if all I did was react to other people's emails, to other people's demands and that, I'd never get round to the things that are important to me.
Yeah.
And I mean like marketing, business development, personal development, the things of that nature. So once I stopped being reactive and being a bit more intentional about where my time was spent, that's when the MSP business grew. So I hope that makes sense. But fast forward to today, and that's become a lifelong habit for me. So when I start my day, for instance, and we'll talk a little bit about some of my routines that I do, but one of the biggest routine that I have is my phone is turned off, my smartphone that is, and it's in a different room. I don't wake up like so many people do, grab my phone, see who's texted me, see who's emailed me, because what you're doing essentially then is letting other people dictate to you how your day is going to go. Yeah. Now, loads of MSPs I speak to say, well, I've just got to check my email first thing in the morning in case there's any emergencies. And I'm like, if there's emergencies, they'll get in touch with you via another method rather than email, for one. And secondly, I don't know any MSP business who, if a client has emailed overnight, the client's not going to notice the difference if you respond to that at like 8 a.m. or 8:30 a.m. I'm not diminishing, we're there to serve the clients, but typically if you start your day reading your phone, looking at social media and things, it's going to drag you down a little bit for a start. Social media tends to do that, and secondly, somebody else is going to dictate to you what you're going to do with your day. So in answer to James' question, one of the routines that I do, the phone is switched off. I get up and I read a chapter of a book. I'm heavily into meditation. I know that might sound a little bit woo-woo, but again, we were talking about mental health earlier. Attitudes are changing. Yeah. We've done 125 of these podcasts, and I've interviewed some of the smartest people in our industry, and then I'm on this podcast. But nearly all of them, Steve, have said, they do some form of meditation. Another one was journaling. So I sit and write my journal every morning. I write 3 things that I'm going to work on that for that day, that if I achieve those 3 things, it would make for a brilliant day. I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. I write myself a little mantra. Those type of things to set me up for the day. So this is the exact opposite of grabbing your phone and then going, right, what do I do today? I'm very intentional about the day. And I've got to throw out as well, because James and I have had this conversation before, 2 other things that I do, and I won't go deep into them. If people are interested, they can reach out to me. I do something, my meditation I do meditation using the app Headspace, but I do it on something called a Shakti mat.
A Shakti mat.
Shakti mat.
You've got to tell us now, what is a Shakti mat?
So a Shakti mat looks a bit like a bed of nails, but it's made of plastic. Bear with me on this one. So the reason I bring it up is because James and I actually saw James in last November. We were on a road trip over in Florida for the Acronis Summit and IT Nation. Anyway, I got my Shakti mat out and lay on it, and James was really intrigued. He was like, what? Now, most people, hearing that would be like, lying on a bed of nails in the morning, you're crazy. But it just has this really relaxing effect on, I lie down on it, so it's on my back. It just chills you out. And when you're meditating as well, it gives you something to focus on, which is a problem a lot of people have with meditation. The mind's racing and that. And I do sort of 20 minutes on that now, meditation. And then if people don't think I'm crazy enough, the other thing that I do, especially if I'm feeling a bit tired, maybe not slept well or whatever, I go and do and this is something I've only started recently, I go and do a cold plunge. So I've got...
that's interesting.
So I've got like ice cold water, and I've got it in the back garden. It's just like I bought a cold plunge that looks a little bit like a mini hot tub. I bought it for £100-200 off Amazon, and I jump in the cold water and I spend about 3 minutes in the cold water. Again, that sounds a bit crazy, but it wakes you up like a foghorn. And secondly, it's hard to be sad or preoccupied or stressed or anything when you've got freezing cold water around you. So Shakti mat, cold water, plunge therapy, I find those things, those are the habits that I've picked up over the years.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot to unpack there, but I just want to go back to the fact that you've got a lot of these tips are actually in your book, the IT Business Owner's Survival Guide. And it's a good way for any business owner, really, that it's full of tips to help you manage your personal headspace and all of that, isn't it? And to actually organise it. So that's really good. So this is the second one from James Steele now, and he asks, he says, you've talked openly about being naturally introverted, but a large part of what you do is now a public speaker, a host, an interviewer. What advice would you give to anyone wanting to step up to those kind of front-facing roles who maybe are a bit introverted themselves?
Oh, great question. Thank you, James. So the first thing I would clarify is I don't think I'm an introvert. I'm definitely extroverted, but I am actually naturally a little bit shy. That might take people by surprise, but I said earlier on, we were talking about business networking. My idea of hell is walking into a room full of strangers and then having to use a lot of energy to walk up to people and say, hi, I'm Richard, and all of that sort of thing. But in answer to James's question, what I've learned is that, other people feel the same way.
Yeah.
So actually, you can be seen as a bit of a leader if you're the one that takes the initiative. So that's business networking. Now, sitting in front of a camera, as we're doing now, you make it easy, Steve, because you're the one asking the questions. But when I'm doing the interviewing or asking the questions or whatever, I've got to think that it's not about me, it's about making the other person feel comfortable. And the same with moderating, we do the not an MSP show, keeping an eye on what the audience are asking as well as, keeping the flow of the show going. That's really important. But it comes down to a practice. So I learnt this tip of my great friend Nigel Moore of the Tech Tribe, the illustrious leader of the Tech Tribe. Now, Nigel, like myself, is around, we would prefer to be spending time around computers than people a lot of the time. Yeah. Maybe that's a sweeping generalisation, but perhaps Nigel would say that is true as well. And Nigel, gets in front of video, records these incredible pieces of content for the Tech Tribe and so forth. the way he got really good at doing that was by doing it again, and again. Now, coming back to something that keeps coming up in this conversation, consistency. Nigel used the opportunity, right, I need to get good at doing video by consistent recording videos for people. So he uses an app called Bonjoro. Everybody who joins the Tech Tribe, so those of you who join the Tech Tribe will be familiar with this, but Nigel will record a video welcoming you to the Tech Tribe and that. And, there's 5,000-6,000 members in the Tech Tribe, more by the time you listen to this. That's 5,000-6,000 videos that Nigel's recorded. Yeah. When you're doing that consistently every single day, every single month, every single year, you overcome the fears, you overcome the resistance to being on camera and doing that. So I think, I learned from Nigel, I send video messages to people instead of emails and things of that nature. That's how I got more comfortable. And the second thing I'd say just about being on stage in front of, instead of being on camera, similar but different, I realized really early on that everybody in the audience was so relieved that I'm the one on stage rather than them. So that's the first thing. I realised that everybody in the audience, wherever I was, wanted me to succeed. Nobody's there like at a comedy club waiting for the comedian to heckle in or anything. Doesn't happen. And then I treat the whole audience, a little bit like I treat the camera, which is you have a conversation with people as though I'm speaking to one person out there. So speaking, and I'll throw one final thing out. If you're starting out on your speaking journey, the advice given to me by my great mentor and speaking coach, Alan Matthews, he said, Richard, if you get nervous going on stage, just remember, it's really rare for a speaker to be physically assaulted by a member of the audience.
Rare but not impossible. That is implied, I'm sure. Brilliant. Well, I've got a question for you now from my friend Gareth Westwood, and he's got a question. What was your first hire when you were officially an MSP? What did you find that you needed to help you succeed? What was your first adventure in hiring somebody? I should do that again.
No worries.
Okay. So I've got a question now from Gareth Westwood, and he asks, "What was your first hire as an MSP?"
Oh, good question. And Gareth, thank you for all you do for the MSP industry. One of the most wonderful people. Runs the Tech Tribe Midlands group down there. Thank you. So, Gareth, my first hire, well, I'll tell you what I did and then I'll tell you what conventional wisdom is. My first hire was actually an office manager, so it was admin. So I hired a lovely lady called Sharon, and she looked after all of the post emails and things of that nature. She did a little bit of answering the phones and that, to free up my time to concentrate on business growth activities, not just reacting all the time. And then after that, I hired engineers and things, to deal with the work, as well as outsourcing. You don't always have to hire, you can outsource, which I keep banging on about, but it's so true and so relevant. So that is how I did it to free up my time, Gareth. However, conventional wisdom says that the phrase front office should drive back office. And what that means is you should be bringing the sales in before you hire people to deal with, administration and all those sort of things. It's a nice problem to have if you've got more work than you can cope with, and then you can deal with that problem by hiring, by outsourcing, and so on and so forth. So that's the conventional wisdom. But again, going back to what I did, I still stand by that actually, because the itty bitty, the little things, the doing RMAs, doing license purchasing, all of those sort of things can really derail like a one-person MSP from their day, as well as all the phone calls and everything that's going on. So my first hire being an office manager meant all of that stuff was dealt with by somebody. But here's the key to it. We systemized, we documented everything that lady did within the business. So then it was easy for somebody else to come in that role. If that person's off sick or off on holiday, somebody else can step in and do those things rather than it pile up. And that's a mentality that I kept throughout my business career. I mean, we work in the business now, the Team Tubb business, massively systemized, isn't it? Everything's documented. We've got checklists for everything. And that's not because we don't trust people to do the work, but it's, if you get on board an airplane, you look in the pilot's cockpit, you can see them going through a checklist. And it's like, well, why are they doing that? They know how to fly the plane. Of course they do. But people are easily distracted. And, so a checklist is a really good way to make sure that you're following the actual process. So, again, back to Gareth's question, the first hire that I made was an admin and office person. Nowadays, you may not even need to hire that person full time. Mm-hmm. We've got wonderful virtual assistants that you can hire. You could work with somebody, 3 of our team are based over in South Africa, and they do incredible work. So virtual assistants might be the way forward if you perhaps have got enough work to keep somebody busy some of the time, but can't afford or don't need somebody full time. A virtual assistant is a great way to do that. So I hope that answers that question.
Excellent. Well, he has a follow-up, and I think this is trying to burrow deep into your psychology here. So,
okay.
What's your favourite choice of starter? Soup, gravlax, garlic mushrooms, or prawn cocktail? He's put down. So.
He wants me to say gravlax there, doesn't he? What a geeky question. I love it though. But yes. Well, we were out for dinner last night, weren't we? At a brilliant Turkish restaurant. And when it comes to our choice of starters, it was virtually everything on the menu, wasn't it? So yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gareth.
Brilliant. So I've got a question here from Paul Havens. He asks, during your MSP days, did you ever acquire another MSP or get close to acquiring another MSP, or were you almost acquired by somebody else?
Oh, great question. And mergers and acquisitions is something that I hear a lot of people in the MSP industry talking about. Yeah. So before I answer that, I would just say that going 2023, we're recording this January 2023, the M&A market is really interesting for the managed service market. So I'm on almost a daily basis, having phone calls from larger MSPs or investors saying, we're in the market, we're looking for an MSP of this size in this part of the country. So interesting times, Paul. But in answer to your question, did I ever acquire or be acquired? Obviously, I sold the business. That doesn't really count as it's an acquisition of sorts. But we went through a merger with another MSP. And during my career being an advisor and things, I've worked with a lot of MSPs who have acquired or merged with other MSPs. And I think the second part of his question was, how did it go? Yeah. In answer to that, if I'm totally honest, mergers, acquisitions, I think are one of the toughest things that you can ever do. The logic behind them, of course, is that you're going to acquire good staff, that you're going to acquire a client base, and you can grow the business really rapidly. In reality, what I see happen is bringing two sets of people together is really difficult if the cultures are different. And nearly every merger that I've seen, it ends up being a lot of the staff leave a lot of the staff from one of the two merged companies leave within sort of 18 months because it's just not working for them. And then you're left with handful, 1, 2, 3 people from the business that you've merged into. So, and the other thing is, the clients, you bring them across, if they don't have that personal service from another business, sometimes the clients don't work out as well. So I'm not really a fan of mergers per se. It seems on paper a good way to do things, but not so much. And that actually acquisitions is very, very similar, where a smaller business is being bought by a larger business. Again, it should work, but unless you do that work on the culture piece to make sure that everybody merges together properly, works on, singing from the same hymn sheet, it's really, really difficult. And Paul, I could give you dozens of UK examples, let alone globally, where mergers and acquisitions really haven't worked very, very well at all. But I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. Well, we've got another one here. They didn't leave their name, but for an MSP just starting out, which communities do you recommend them inquiring about? This kind of goes back to what one of the earlier questions about MSP communities. So which ones do you recommend?
So it's going to come as no surprise whatsoever. I used to be the chairman of the CompTIA community. I think it's, as I joked earlier, once I stepped down as chairman 10 years ago, it really became a wonderful community and exploded. The CompTIA community is global. Here in the UK, we've got quarterly meetups People get together at CompTIA. It's vendor neutral. Vendors are welcome as well to go along there. That is a fantastic community. There's also CompTIA in-person communities in the Benelux and a big presence in the United States as well. And I know the people at CompTIA are also looking at places like Australia, South Africa and things. So CompTIA, it's an absolute no-brainer. If you're working the MSP industry, sign up for membership. It's like £150, £200 a year or whatever. You gain access to all the meetings and all the content. Brilliant. Now, talking of content, the other community that I absolutely recommend would be the Tech Tribe, the most awesome online community run by Nigel Moore and his team there. Nigel's a former MSP, knows this industry inside and out, and produces incredible content. So unlike other communities such as Reddit and Facebook and things like that, no great knock on them because you can get information, but it tends to be a bit like the Wild West, doesn't it, online? If you go online and ask a question, you'll get 100 responses telling you how stupid you are and maybe one piece of gold, as opposed to the Tech Tribe, which is a nurturing, welcoming community, and you'll get really warm, good feedback. So CompTIA, the Tech Tribe has also got local community meetups. I'm very proud of that initiative we put together in the UK. There's now like a dozen or more groups, and those appearing in Europe and other places. And the third type of community that I'd recommend to people is vendor communities. And, vendors aren't the bad guys here. This isn't a confrontational relationship. The vendors know that if they help you grow your MSP business, their business is going to grow as a result. So I'd encourage you to build up relationships with your vendors, go to conferences, that even vendor-related conferences and things, and you'll meet really good people. So think about it. The vendor that you're working with probably works with some of the best MSPs in the world. You can gain access to those MSPs and exchange ideas, best practices, that type of thing. So there's dozens and dozens of great communities. The network group here in the UK, brilliant one. I'm hearing great things about Brigantia, Synaxon, and then the other thing I'll throw out there, if you're in a part of the world and you think, well, there's no groups near to me, go and have a look at an app called Meetup, the Meetup app there, and just say you would probably be shocked to find that there's things like Microsoft 365, Linux, open source. There's here in the Northeast, there's an Azure Web Services, Amazon Web Services and Azure user group, and these are all on the Meetup app as well. So not necessarily just for MSPs, but a great way to meet other people.
Brilliant. Now, we have a question from our friend Pascal Fintoni. Now, he knows that you moved to Newcastle from Birmingham a few years ago, but how long did it take you to adjust to the way people speak here and the way people act, I think is how he tried to put it. How well have you adapted to the accent of people from the Toon?
Oh wow! Well, yes, it was a challenge, but I think, in fairness, they probably struggled with my Brummie accent just as much.
Well, I was going to say that, yes.
And Pascal, of course, our great friend, mentor, and just learnt so much about content off production off Pascal. So Pascal's French and moved to England, then to the Northeast, and now he's back in France and that. But yeah, so how a Frenchman coped with the Northern accent, I just don't know. And behind the camera here, we've got Mark Orr, who is our wonderful video editor. And Mark, what's it called, Mark? Is it Pit Yak? Yeah, Pit Yak, which is what the miners and stuff, that sort of language that they use, that's impenetrable. So let alone Geordie, and of course we're not too far from Scotland, you've got the Scottish accent and stuff as well. So I do struggle at times. I should give some context as well. So why people ask, why are you in Newcastle? And it's because, so I'm Birmingham, born and bred, the same as you, Stephen. So Birmingham, slap bang in the centre of England, lived all my life there. But then when I got married to my wife, Claire had been living, Claire's also from Birmingham, just to confuse people, but she'd been living in Newcastle for the last 20 odd years. And so I moved up to the Toon, as they call it, to be with Claire and to live up here. And I've got to say, absolutely love Newcastle upon Tyne. I rather romantically said to Claire the other day, I said, you know what? If we got divorced, I would still think I'd live in Newcastle. And she said, oh, that's so sweet. But I love Newcastle, love the people. And yeah, the accent takes a bit of getting used to.
Excellent. Right. So that's all the questions from our audience. So I've now got a few quick fire ones just to kind of finish it up on. So if you can just give us answers to these, you don't have to make these long ones.
Sure.
But
That'll be tough for me.
I'll start with this. Exactly. I'll start with this one then. So what has been your biggest mistake in business?
Great question. Very short answer, overly trusting of people. So I've now learned the hard way that it's good to be trusting of people, but the phrase goes trust but verify. Yeah. So sometimes, I've trusted people a little bit too much to do things, and then that's cost me in terms of relationships with clients and things of that nature. So trust but verify.
Brilliant. Next question: what's your favourite television show at the moment?
So top of the list would have to be, of course, I'm a massive geek. So Doctor Who.
Doctor Who.
Love Doctor Who. That's up there. But my favourite television show at the moment, Doctor Who's been around 60 odd years. I love the show Billions on Sky Atlantic. Absolutely love that show, and avid watching for me. But it might surprise people as well to hear that the other show that I watch without fail is the British soap EastEnders. I watch that 3 times a week. And people, why are you watching EastEnders? I absolutely love that show. And we've not even touched on all the pro wrestling that I watch on television and stuff. But maybe that's one for another podcast.
Brilliant. And outside of business, or outside of your business, what do you like to do for fun? And you've just mentioned wrestling, so we might as well start with that. So,
well, to clarify, I don't wrestle. But I love, my wife and I are really heavily into pro wrestling, going to shows. So people, the uninitiated might think like WWE, Hulk Hogan, that sort of thing, but there's a whole world of wrestling. My favourite promotion is one called AEW, All Elite Wrestling, fairly new promotion. It's brilliant, but we watch Japanese wrestling, Mexican wrestling. There's a huge independent scene of wrestling, local shows and stuff here in the UK. Yeah. And Claire and I have been fortunate enough to make friends with a lot of the guys who have gone on to headline like WrestleManias and things like that. Now, I know it's a short answer, but for anybody going, well, you seem like a smart guy. You realise wrestling is fake and that. So is your latest Arnold Schwarzenegger film.
It's theatre, though, isn't it?
Yeah. So we know that it's predetermined, but just in the same way as watching a theatre show or a movie or whatever, as long as you suspend your disbelief and get into it. But that's all I'll say about wrestling for now.
It's fantastic. You definitely need to go and watch one live. It's amazing. Right, and a final one from me. Now, the purpose of this episode was to be about your origins. And of course, when we think of origins, we think of superhero origins stories. So this question I'm going to ask you. So if there was a character from a comic book that you most resonate with, who would that be?
Oh, I love that one. So again, we were just talking about what I'm into outside of work and that. I'm a massive comic book geek. I've got tens of thousands of comics, and I'm talking, and mostly I do digital comics now because there's just not enough space at home to store all the old comics and stuff. But which comic character do I most resonate with? So I definitely know the answer to that one, but it might be a character that people are not familiar with. So it's a Marvel character called Quasar. And Quasar, behind the mask, is a guy called Wendell Vaughn. And Wendell is a mild-mannered guy lacking a killer instinct who doubts himself constantly and struggles sometimes with mental health. And as a kid, I read that, and I was like, and to this day, that's, we've talked about mental health, we've talked about the inner critic and all of those things. Those are still things that I wrestle with. So, Wendell Vaughn, Quasar, and anybody who doesn't know Quasar, he's a little bit like Marvel's version of Green Lantern in the DC universe. But again, I'm getting far too geeky, so I hope that answers that.
That's brilliant. So, I mean, we've mentioned a lot of things in this episode of TubbTalk. We're going to try and put as many of them many of these things in the show notes for you, so you can go and check them out. But it just now leaves me to say, Richard Tubb, thank you very much for being the guest on the 125th episode of TubbTalk. I hope you've enjoyed being on that side of the
I have.
interview.
It's been fantastic. And personal thank you to you. You joined our team 12 months ago, I think it is.
12 months ago,
now,
yeah.
And you've had a massive impact, not just on my business, but the managed service industry. I know you're a very well-known name now. You go to the local events and things. People have got to know you very, very well, and you do brilliant work for us. Mark is behind the camera. Thank you, Mark, for editing the Tubbservatory videos every week. And we've got Gudrun, who is going to be listening to this and doing the show notes. Thank you, Gudrun, for putting up with my long-winded answers and documenting them so well. And the rest of the team, we've got Lara, Roxanne, Maxine, Karina, my PA. We've got Pascal, does incredible work. James, who edits the podcasts as well. We've got Michelle, our ops manager. The most wonderful team. But thank you for doing this, Stephen. So really, really enjoyed it.
So that's all from us at TubbTalk, the podcast for IT consultants. Richard will be back for the next one. We'll see you then.
Hey folks, Richard here. Thanks for listening today. I know you've got a ton of options for who you listen to nowadays, so I really appreciate your support. Do you have any feedback on this episode? Ideas for future guests? Tweet me at Tubblog using the hashtag TubbTalk. I respond to every tweet and really appreciate your feedback. Hey team, this is Richard again. Just one more thing before you take off, and that is MSP Insights. Now, every Tuesday, I share my thoughts on the business of IT with you, the managed service community. Thousands of managed service providers already subscribe to MSP Insights. It's easy to sign up, easy to cancel. MSP Insights is basically a short email from me every Tuesday without fail with advice on growing your IT business, plus cool resources I've found, discovered, or started exploring that week. It's kind of like my diary of cool things, and often includes articles or books I've read, tools I've discovered, and events I think you'd be interested in, often sent to me by my friends and TubbTalk podcast guests. So, if that sounds fun, a short tiny bite of MSP goodness every Tuesday, and you'd like to try it out, just go to go.tubb.co/Tuesday. That's go.tubb.co/Tuesday. Drop in your email and you'll get the very next one. Thanks for listening.